Hello and welcome to FinTech Talk. I'm your host, Charles Orton-Jones. Today we're looking at the increasing threat of AI fraud in banking and finance. The era of poorly spelt Nigerian 419 emails is long over. The new generation of fraud is highly sophisticated. We've got AI deepfakes, we've got LLM-assisted phishing attacks, and a whole host of new threat vectors that are costing banks an absolute fortune. What can you do about it? And where is this trend going? Well, to find out, we've found two of the world's leading experts on the subject of AI fraud who are going to talk us through the issues as thoroughly as possible. So hopefully by the end of this short session, your institution is going to be well versed in what exactly you should be doing to combat AI fraud. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the panel Nissan Bangiev. Nissan, if you turn your camera on, Nissan is Fraud Risk Officer at Valley Bank, a huge US institution with $62 billion in assets. 200 consumer branches. Valley covers real estate, commercial, industrial, healthcare, and non-profit. And yeah, it's Nissan's job to combat AI fraud at this institution. So Nissan, great to have you with us.
Thanks, Charles. Great to be here.
And we also have with us Nishant Verma. Nishant, if you turn your camera on, Nishant was head of fraud at Financial Crime Engineering Prevention at NatWest Bank, a UK institution which everyone in Britain will certainly know. It's been around for 300 years. Branches absolutely on every high street in Britain, and it's affiliated with Coutts and RBS, but it's a pretty venerable and famous brand. And yeah, it's been Nishant's role for many, many years to combat AI fraud. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. And we're just going to kick off really with just a recent news article that sums up what's going on. If our producer puts it on screen, the headline says it all. Can you spot an AI fraud? And Nissan, I mean, you are an expert. You work in the industry. Can you spot a financial fake? I mean, are you confident that you can see through every fake and fraudulent message that comes your way? Or is AI making these things so good that it's just even fooling people like you, an expert?
Yeah, so Charles, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was 16, I got the worst possible fake ID you can think of. Literally went to this corner store and I got something that said college ID. So back in my day, fakes were horrible and easy to detect. Nowadays, I have a team of 5 people stare at an ID and they can't figure it out. So no, so it's at this point it's almost impossible unless you're really looking at very slight nuances in lettering and changes to a document, especially driver's license, passports, and as well as business documentation. Right, it's getting way better. The ability for these fraudsters to jump on and use fraud AI and all these other tools they have available to produce these documents. It's virtually impossible for banks to use IDs as their primary method of identity verification.
Well, this is a new area, therefore. I mean, Nishant, again, same question to you. I mean, can you spot a fake? And what does it tell us? You know, what Nishant was saying, what does it tell us about the scale of this challenge?
Yeah, we used to use this phrase very frequently. It's not humanly possible, and I think it's not humanly possible to detect what AI has generated. Just to put in context, as a bank and as an engineering leader, I had to run a hackathon, which was just to find if a photo or a video was fake or real. And the best one, which won the award, was also only 93% accurate, which means that at least among the 1,000 participants who tried to develop a software to detect a fake image or a video to a real one, was still having 7% of accuracy. So it tells us that we are all exposed, we are all vulnerable, and hence we need to continuously run in a race with the hackers. In race of technology, AI, to make sure that we are combating fraud on a daily basis. And every day there is new technology. Every day fraudsters are using the latest technologies, and banks and financial institutions have to keep up with that.
Well, great. So it's a red hot issue. I mean, Nissan, just talk us through some of the ways in which AI is helping fraudsters. I mean, what are these attack vectors?
Sure. I mean, it's pretty much anything you could think of, from, like I mentioned, the creating of these false identities. It's also just the scalability of their attacks. So whereas before, fraudsters were sort of limited to sort of how much they could, their sort of man hours. Now they could literally create these documents and then be able to blast hundreds of institutions with fake account openings. You see these attacks coming, and you have to be able to spot them and be able to react in time. So really, it's the scalability. AI has really allowed fraudsters to really make this a cottage industry. They now are similar how us as financial institutions, we're looking at technologies to invest in for the sake of our customers, and for the sake of our business. These fraudsters are being able to do the same. They're finding all these new technologies, whether it be the AI to replicate voice, biometrics, identification. It cuts across the board, and they have a lot available to them.
Nisha, where's the cutting edge on this? I mean, we're all used to some of the accelerated digital KYC methods, such as looking into a smartphone and getting a video readout. So, I mean, where's the cutting edge with AI fraud? What is it still struggling to do, and what has it recently learned to do?
So video is very easy for AI to replicate. If I have to cite a recent example, there was a medium-sized investor for our bank who was a customer, and there were 5 CEOs of other organizations who created relationship with this person over virtual meetups and webinars like this for a good 6 months, and then they got on a call like this to talk and give their investment advice, which the person took because he was having a professional relationship with them for 6 months. Just turns out all the CEOs with whom he was talking to were all deep fakes for last 6 months. And of course, the investment advice was a bait in which he lost a few million pounds there. So video is totally going out of context, and you can't believe a video. Now, if I have to say, is it something which is still struggling to do? A little bit. If the customer is very aware, then the social engineering bit is still people are able to find out for the aware people, where somebody is picking up the phone and trying to talk to them, and let's suppose say we are doing a testing on your account, and can you put 1234 in the amount column and send it to this account, and 12345 is actually 12,345 pounds, and it is done under pretext of testing. So that bit is still not able to do in a more sophisticated way, but I think it will be another few weeks or months in which we will see the social engineering also getting completely captured by AI. So we need to be on our toes as to how we can start detecting and helping our customers of the financial institutions to be more aware as to how they can be kept safe for against the fraud and financial crimes which they're exposed to.
That's great. I'm interested in how this scales up. I mean, Nissan, you mentioned the word scale. When fraudsters begin their first approaches trying to persuade your customers to interact with them, I'm going to assume they can do that using quite a crude mail shot approach many people. Does this then filter down so that a lot of people won't reply, some will reply, some will get automated AI responses, and then maybe later the fraudsters take over personally? How does it work? How's this kind of cascade? How do they sift their prospects?
Yeah, so Charles, it is a combination of fraudsters are now using these really sophisticated bots, whereas before, where these bots were fairly binary, now these bots have been trained with AI, and they could interact with the customer, setting them up, and once they have someone on the hook, it can then move to someone with more a person behind there that could then continue essentially the scam until they're able to be able to consummate the scam. But yeah, so the technology on the bot side has really grown tremendously, and it has given a great tool for fraudsters to cast a wide net, and once they get their hooks into someone, then move that on towards a human who kind of jumps in, and you basically have these fraud factories all over, predominantly in Africa, in Asia, where you literally have hundreds and hundreds of unfortunately trafficked people, for the most part, that have been placed in these factories under the pretenses that they would be working and employed, usually in working as a housekeeper or as a babysitter or something like that. And these poor people are being trafficked, and they are forced into working under the threat of harm to their families back home. So it's really unfortunate, because you're usually that scammer that you're talking to, more often than not, is also a victim of human trafficking. So it's a very, very unfortunate scenario.
Wow, it's not a world I know much about. Nishal, I can see you nodding away there. What do we know about the location and situation of people involved in AI fraud?
Yeah. So we generally call this modern slavery, in which from the ancient times we used to have slaves, and modern slavery is where you get people on the pretext of offering them a job or better livelihood, but then you get into the whole whirlwind of getting stuck. And as Nissan was saying, that even the people who are attempting to do these frauds are also victim of human trafficking, and they are doing it. Some are doing it out of greed, but a lot of them are doing it out of fear, a fear of their own lives, including. So it's a pretty sorry situation. And yes, some of the centers in terms of the global world would be mostly Africa, some part of South Asia, where we have big, cartels of such organizations, where they continuously do use the latest and greatest technologies. In fact, they use the latest and greatest even compute engines like some of the public clouds to do all of this. And the good thing for them is that they don't have a regulatory need to go through a change process. So if they can deploy a trick in their head against fraudsters maybe in a couple of hours, but for financial organizations, they will have to, if I have to put a counter attack, it might take a little more time for me to put that counter attack. So they're using this to their advantage to make sure they're always trying to get one step ahead of the time. But modern slavery has become a pretty gruesome topic. And in fact, we are also having financial indicators when we find out if some of our customers are going through that modern slavery, and we can almost try to predict if they are going towards the phase where they are going to put into some illegal things like trafficking or doing fraud and financial crime for some other customers of other banks.
So as you say, you were trying to ascertain whether your customers were involved in this or connected to it.
Yes, we can almost start seeing how our customers, when they start getting unaccounted money in their accounts, we start getting curious as to what a large amount of cash deposit, and then you start getting foreign remittances, not in the local currency there. So we start to create these flags to see what's the root cause of all of these financial events, because we try to also know the source of their income, and if the income against the deposits what they're doing, or income against the expenditure they are doing, let's suppose a credit card and somebody else is paying that, it starts to give indicators that they are probably getting into some kind of trouble. And at appropriate time, we do also put those checks to make sure that we as a bank are not being used to get stuck some of our own customers to be leading into some of the bad things like we just talked about, human trafficking.
So Charles, you think Charles, you think about like on every side of a scam is a mule account, right? So that those mule accounts are accumulating. Usually they could be at your institution. They're the ones that are scamming victims. That money has to go somewhere. So you have an obligation not only to protect your customers from being scammed, but also to identify those first-party fraudsters, those mule accounts that are sitting. And sometimes these mule accounts could be, and this is why you need to be careful of synthetic identities and identity theft. A lot of times they're legitimate people. Charles, there might be, unfortunately, your ID got compromised, your information got compromised, and some fraudster just opened up an account at some institution, and they're using your identity to funnel money through scams at other institutions. So as an organization, you need to be cognizant of both the scam and the mule. So it's a two-side on every fraud. There's two sides to the coin, right? You have the scam side and you have the mule side.
Yeah, well, let's just keep going about how we combat this fraud. I mean, in terms of, Nissan, just tell us about some of the methods you use. And something that pops into my head is stuff like, digital fingerprinting, where companies, I don't know, specialist company LexisNexis have a product called Threat Metrics that logs every keystroke, every swipe on a phone.
Yes.
It can detect whether the habits of the user have changed. I mean, what sort of stuff are you involved in? Because there's just so many potential avenues for combating fraud. What works for you?
So Charles, you mentioned threat metrics, and there is a lot of these behavioral biometrics vendors out there. And what I was mentioning with the bots, what's interesting is these bots are now able to mimic, mimic a human filling out an account opening form. So they are getting much better using AI technology to mimic this. So you have to be careful of that. So the point is, I think no matter what you mention, there's probably some AI technology out there that is trying to defeat that control. So what is important is I always say you got to go to fundamentals. You want to have a multi-layered approach. You want to really not have a one-size-fit-all approach to your onboarding, and that's where it starts, right? So first of all, you have to take a look at what sources you're using to do the identity verification, right? Are you verifying information that they provided against maybe some government sources? That's a start. That's the basis, right? And then you might introduce mobile-centric verification, right? Where you're authenticating via the mobile phone that they're using to open the account. You're triangulating, making sure the right geolocation, IP address, all that. And then you might introduce the behavioral biometrics if it's an online form, right? So, and then there's a variety of other things you can do. And then on top of that, what I think is important, and where we're trying to gravitate towards is inevitably there's no way you're going to keep everyone out. But as you accumulate data, it's very important to be able to use that data to go back and perhaps create some sort of model using AI to help you navigate and tune your workflow to be able to understand, hey, this type of applicant, it looks like maybe from this type of either this location or this domain address or whatever the case may be, this might be an indicator, a higher risk for fraud. So you have this ability now, if you're collecting your data, to be able to create a model and feed back your fraud cases back into that model and teach that model and be able to deploy it and help you with in your onboarding. So that is where you need to go in order to really, at this point, keep up with the fraudsters.
Nishan, again, I can see you agreeing with every word of that, and as I was, it just sounds like there's no silver bullet to this. It just requires many bullets. Tell us what's your approach, Nishan?
So very similar to what Nissan said. I think I'm sure the organization Nissan works with also does the same, but we also collaborate with other banks through our FCA. Where we're not just keeping the data to ourselves, but we share it, at least in the cases which have been successful in terms of fraud prevention, and even when we have not been successful, because that creates the training data for future references of the same thing. So I think we are learning from the mistakes or the failures which we are doing, but not only the mistakes which us as a bank have done, but all the banks in the in the region who are trying to collaborate now, because very often when there's a customer of a bank, he or she might have accounts in other places, and hence sharing this data becomes very much powerful. And even the patterns, when a fraudster tries to do fraud of financial crime, they don't limit themselves to a bank. They'll try to do it across all the banks. So we're trying to learn it by collaborating with data on almost on a instantaneous basis. Either we have been able to prevent a fraud, or we have not been able to. And that is creating the training data for all of us. So that's in addition to what Nissan was saying.
Yeah. And Charles, there are some vendors now that are using it's interesting, they're using your sort of internet behavioral activity, where previously that information was used to market to you and sell you products. You know how you're basically you're talking about, oh, I love a slice of pizza, and all of a sudden you have Domino's or something is popping up on your phone. So the ability for them to track sort of your behavior and market to you now, they are using that technology to give you insights into whether, hey, does this look like Nissan, who is opening up an account at this bank? Nissan is from New York. Why would he be opening up an account in Minnesota or something? So this doesn't look like, Nissan wouldn't be logging in at 2 in the morning so they could use your behavior to understand your typical activity. And some of these vendors, I mean, they're seeing your activity almost like for 93% of the country. They're seeing it on almost a daily basis. Like they'll go in and, let's say I open up WhatsApp or something. They're like, okay, they can track everything, and they're using that data to help establish your identity, so that if someone tries to open an account, and like Nishant was saying, they do it at scale, right? All of a sudden, you're going to have like 100 accounts or 10 accounts or dozen accounts trying to be opened across many different financial institutions. It would be able to detect that information and indicate that this is probably a fraudster. So there is the good news is that there's a lot of interesting vendors that are trying to actually use some of that technology for good, as opposed to just marketing more stuff for us to buy.
Yeah, there's some great vendors. I work closely with LexisNexis, so again, try and pull together information across institutions that they work with. But Nissan, how does it work in the US? I mean, do you have alliances with other banks? Do you share information? Do you rely on vendors to connect you with other banks and financial institutions? How are you sharing information with others in your industry?
Yeah, Charles, it's a combination of all of that. We have various committees that we sit on. We love to exchange information because fraud, and I have noticed amongst fraud officers, and there's a vested interest in all of us sharing our best practices. That we're not competing against each other, right? So we're very happy to walk each other through things that work, things that don't work. So whether it's the use of committees through vendors that are doing all of these presentations on their products and showcases and stuff, and a variety of sources, but we are trying to connect better and exchange that information and help each other in this fight, because to me it's threatening the integrity of the financial system.
But yeah, I'd like to just ask about the government's role in all this. I mean, the US is blessed with a whole alphabet spaghetti soup of regulatory institutions. Everyone, the FBI, I don't know whether the CIA get involved, with the Department of Homeland Security, but this fundamentally can come down to, US security. Which government institutions actually prove useful, Nissan? Who do you talk to who's helpful?
I would say almost none of them. But that is
none of them.
that is
How much money is being spent on this, and it's none of them.
Yeah, no, but I think there's that is slowly changing. So there is an organization called the Aspen Institute. They are actually bringing together financial institutions, telecom, social media companies. They're gathering them all together, and we're trying to figure out, hey, how can we stop fraud, scams, and the use of AI fraud? So that is an initiative that has kicked off in the U.S. We might be a bit behind the UK, I would say, but I think we're starting to understand that fraud is here to stay. It's only going to expand, and I think the government has started to pay attention.
Nishan, perhaps you give us a reflection on the UK and India. Nishan is talking from Delhi at the moment. Can you say any more praise for our collective governments? Because I was sort of chuckling from Nissan saying he doesn't get any help from the US institutions, which are actually lavished with huge budgets. India and US, Nishan, who helps you?
Yeah, in the UK, definitely FCA's authority which has at least for the last 5 years has worked very closely to make sure that the data sharing and the event sharing is happening on a real time. So that bit is done in UK. So we are now working on collective AI models to prevent and fight fraud. So we are collaborating with some of our we call them competitors in the business world, but here we call them partners with other banks to try to see combat fraud by collectively working. So that bit I think is advanced. In India, I think we are lagging behind. The Reserve Bank of India and the Indian government has realized the impact of financial crime and fraud, but I have not yet seen a very strong Indian government body which is actually working to make a difference. So yes, there are many bodies which are trying to bring in regulations, etc. But one, the repercussions of if you get caught by a fraud is not very severe. So there is very less fear of repercussion. In case if I get caught, maybe I'll get a few months in jail and that's about it. So I think some of the laws also in the Indian ecosystem are very far from mature, and the Indian government bodies are the same. But the UK, I would say, is pretty advanced in terms of the repercussion is very high. We have government bodies which kind of bring multiple industries together, as Nissan was saying, not only the banks, but the telecoms, the internet providers, etc., because the data is something which is coming across. And we are collectively working on models for fraud prevention and financial crime prevention. So
thanks. We have actually a question just from the floor. Nissan, could you please name the institution you mentioned again?
Aspen Institute?
Yeah, it was the Aspen Institute. So for people watching, yeah, that's the one to look out for. And just as we start to wrap up, I mentioned just what could be more radical steps that could be undertaken to combat AI fraud. And something I've seen work well, I live half the year in the country of Estonia, where everyone has a digital ID card with 2 pins, which is so secure. I mean, half of voting now for elections is done online, and the Russians hammer Estonia with cyber attacks. So we know it's pretty secure. And I compare that to the UK, where in order to prove an identity, you have to do things like print out your gas bill and take it into a bank. And I think a child with Photoshop could get around that. It's absolutely wretched. So I'm a huge advocate of the Estonian system using a cutting-edge cryptography, using chip and pin. I mean, the UK, we know we're backward. When our NHS still uses fax machines. What do you think? Would a government scheme such as no ID card with a chip on it, PIN numbers, help you guys at all?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we're Charles. We're on the same boat. The number of times that whenever we have to verify an address and having to bring in a water bill or something, I mean, it's I can jump in and create a fake bill. I don't even need AI. Although AI makes it a lot easier. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is where we need to go. You have to have that sort of digital identity. I know they're talking about at some point we're going to move all IDs into like a digital version. You don't have to carry your ID around. Yeah, absolutely. This is where we need to go. I think we need to stop relying on documents in all facets of life, because unfortunately, documents are easily reproducible and they're easily forged at this point. Same thing with signatures. At this point, we shouldn't be using signatures to
100%,
verify. Yeah, my signature, especially like you open an account and your signature when you're like 18 and it looks like and versus that, I mean, what use is it? It's not much use. So we have to modernize. I think that's something where us as a country, this is where I think slowly we're gravitating towards. Unfortunately, the fraudsters have beat us to the punch, so we really need to sort of speed up our shifting towards a more digital economy.
I sincerely hope so. I must confess, I talked to a very senior technologist who works with our National Health Service, and I asked him why there's such poor reform in that regard. And he said when he speaks to politicians, he needs to speak very, very slowly, trying to explain the merits of cloud native systems or cryptography or digital identities extremely difficult if you're talking to people who don't have that background. I mean, the notarial system in the UK, my father is, if he's watching, is a notary who deals with people every day who are trying to prove their identity. That's still run by the Archbishop of Canterbury in the UK, and the European system is run by the Pope. I mean, it literally medieval. But Nishan, in India, you have the Aadhaar system. So people have, you're ahead of the UK, ahead of the US. You do have digital identities with biometric backup. Is that helping?
Tremendously, I would say. It is helping because it adds into multi-layer of authentication, as Nissan was saying. So we can do a lot of stuff using Aadhaar. I can use Aadhaar to make my face as my boarding pass into an airport. So I can keep walking, and it's my face to my Aadhaar, so I don't need to show tickets and all, and I can keep walking to the gate without any human interaction. So yes, Aadhaar is changing the way Indians have worked. Digital payments are easier, but now we've started seeing even cases of Aadhaar getting cloned, fingerprints getting cloned, and hence
Really?
I would not be really surprised if we add more. We have to add more authentication onto Aadhaar. For example, today fingerprint is the only authentication if you really want to do that, and a mobile OTP. But maybe we'll soon get into retina scans or heartbeat scans, etc., to add more authentication layers.
A
To do
heartbeat
that.
scan. You've given me something new here. A heartbeat scan.
That's the research I've been reading about it. That's a new biometric thing. If they, go ahead and start reading your heartbeat or your pulse for a couple of minutes, they can find patterns if it is really you. And because the smartphone can now do that, or your Apple Watch can do that, they're trying to use that as in combination with your fingerprint and retina scan. They're trying to make it as foolproof as possible because fingerprints are easily getting replicated. Very,
Let
very.
me ask you, how are fingerprints easily replicated? How are people getting the initial scan? Because tokenization means you can't work backwards from the end thing. So how are they doing it?
Exactly. So India is a population full of people where people are still doing signatures and thumbprints. In a lot of places, you have to act the thumbprint. Even if I'm a literate person, I cannot once have a signature because there are some places where you have to put a thumbprint. Like if I buy a new house, I will have to put a lot of thumbprints. Now that's the place which can pick it up. And
That's the giveaway. I forgot I dealt with a legal document just last week for an elderly Indian gentleman who had an ink thumbprint, which we don't often see in England. He was selling eggs, I think, in your region, actually. It struck me as a touch archaic, but all they're really doing is leaving a highly copyable imprint for the fraudster to get hold of.
Exactly. That's why we'll probably be adding it with retina scans and heartbeat scans to try to make it more difficult. And I'm sure then fraudsters will come find a way to even copy that. But now that looks like the next new ray of hope.
Okay, and just to finish up, I'd just like to ask you guys about the scale of this problem. I mean, we've covered some of the threats, but I mean, Nissan, in terms of number, in theory, they could almost launch limitless attacks with AI. Just tell us about the volume. How are you coping with the volume? What's it like? Is it increasing? Are they being more selective? Because then at high volume will trigger an alert. So just what's the frequency like? Is it going up or down?
Yeah, so I mean, we're definitely seeing an increase. Typically, what we've noticed is when we have, and Valley Bank, we are more so a brick and mortar bank. So we have a lot of branches across the metro area, Florida, Alabama. But we do have a digital bank. So whenever we run some sort of promotion for our online bank, you see a massive scale of attacks, right? The word gets out probably all over the dark web, and they just start pinging you, and which leads to another important, for anyone out there within a financial institution, if you don't have a dark web vendor that is searching the dark web for compromised accounts, credentials, and all that, absolutely get one. It's absolutely worth the money. So you see the scale really when we're running some kind of promotion. So that's what we've been seeing.
And Nisha, what's your experience? Out west.
I think pretty similar to what Nissan says, because we also have to look at our customer base. And UK as a country also, the average age is high for the customers. So a lot of people still would like to and go and have that human connect. So that helps. But as they're trying to use technology, they are becoming more and more vulnerable to these attacks, because they had spent more than half of their life trying to do very traditional banking, and all of a sudden everything is new and we're trying to do multi-factor authentication, people getting OTPs, etc. So we see a lot of cases of fraud happening, not because of a technology or AI, but just because of a simple social engineering.
Okay, and just to finish, I suppose, I mean, it sounds like a time-honored point that must come down to a lot of education. That you just need to persuade your customers to know what to spot. Nissan, is that obvious a thing to point out? I mean, it's just customer education, the education for all of us.
Customer education, and now there is a lot of use of agentic AI in interacting with your customers to break them out of the scam spell. So I think we're going to go towards a place where we're going to have more tools in our arsenal, because as much as you educate the customers, while it is helpful, once they get into the trance of a scam, it's hard to break them out. So there's I think new technology coming down the road that would assist institutions as well, largely leveraging agentic AI.
A message. So yeah, Nishant, a mix of blunt stuff, such as I noticed the banks at Monzo, when you try and do a transaction, sometimes pings up, "Are you sure this isn't a scam?" Quite basic stuff mixed with super clever stuff. So that sounds like the way forward, therefore, Nishant.
Yes, definitely it does. For example, when we see even patterns which looks like a social engineering, we do a pop-up, or sometimes people just call up the customer, "Are you doing such and such thing happening?" And we are trying to even take permissions from our customers to see if we can track more of their phone activities when they have installed our app. And if they give a consent, then we can also start tracking some of the activities outside our app on some other applications, to make sure that we can alert them if they are being trying to be duped.
Okay, well, guys, thank you so much for your time. That's been hugely educational for me. Yeah, I'm really fascinated by how willing you guys are to share your insights. And I hope if people are working for a financial organization that feels a little isolated, they know they can actually go out and either formally or informally talk to other organizations. Vendors are very willing to connect, either through data or informally, with other organizations to share skills. I am still chuckling that Nissan doesn't get much help from the US government. All those huge budgets spent for naught. And yeah, shame on countries like the UK, where we're still using wet signatures, archbishops to police the system. It probably, in the age of AI, getting the Archbishop of Canterbury and his crack squad of clerics probably isn't the best plan. But yeah, guys, Nishan, and everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us on FinTech Talk.
Thank you for having me.